Is there any questions at all?
Would you mind a slightly challenge?
No, I like challenges.
not doing it. But the point you were making there about the karmas loving bags of stool and things.
Yeah. I always put that in my classes. It's my trademark.
Well, so you mentioned also about renunciation. Well, sometimes what we were saying there is that we should love the highest, but we may not actually be able to hit the highest very quickly. It may take several lifetimes, and then we could, in one sense, without any love at all. I mean, I know karmis. A large degree, they will love the body and so on, but they're also loving the soul in there too. They actually do love, but they don't really realize what they're loving. But there is that love for the soul there too. So as devotees, sometimes we could become a little bit renounced and say, I don't love this person, and we lose a lot of normal, good feelings that are there towards other devotees because we think, well, I'm not going to love that person because they're just, I feel that I was a little bit of a victim to that myself early on in Krishna consciousness of,
Artificial renunciation, that's called.
Yeah, and not replacing it with...
The thing is that, you see, you can't renounce unless you have something superior. If you don't have something superior, then it's artificial to renounce. So, the superior thing, obviously, is to go back to home, back to God. That's the superior thing, which we all strive for. Because that realization is very, very difficult to understand the nature of the spiritual world and to have the strength to maintain a spiritual stand. At the same time, the body, of course, you see, all energy is Krishna's energy. This is one thing I want to discuss, but there's no time and I didn't really construct the class in the right way. But all energy is spiritual. There is no material energy. Everything is coming from Krishna, and everything is spiritual. But the function is different. You see, you must understand the function is different. So, we must understand the functional aspect of nature. The natural attraction, just like when I see a young girl, a little baby, 5-year-old, I'm naturally attracted. And you're naturally attracted to cuddle it and play with it. And this is natural. It's not an unnatural thing because this is the manifestation of Krishna's energy. But the thing is that, I'll give you a good example. A very good example was, Prabhupada was in his room with a group of sannyasis, all the big leaders were talking with him. So then a very beautiful brahmacharini walked in. And Prabhupada looked at the brahmacharini and he said, isn't she beautiful? And like all the sannyasis went, renunciation, haribol. So they were a bit bewildered. And Prabhupada said, isn't she beautiful? So everyone looked around the room and went, yeah. She was beautiful. And then Prabhupada said, so, what are you going to do about it? So they all kind of looked at each other. And then Prabhupada sort of leaned back and slapped on his knee. And he said, absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, the appreciation of Krishna's energy must also be there. So, we're not impersonalists. Yes, there is beauty. And that beauty is coming from the soul, which you rightly say. And it's manifested in personalities. So those personalities are naturally beautiful. We see this beauty is coming out in various ways. Kindness, gentleness, simplicity, tolerance. Just like, I'm negative because that's a sort of one side of the coin. But on the positive side, we see that there's many beautiful qualities of a person in the material world. The thing is, appreciation is okay in the background of spiritual life. In other words, one must perform his activities in the background of spiritual life. So there's no harm in having a very nice relationship with the wife or the children or having emotions, but in the background of understanding that all these things are resting in the Supreme Personality of God. Just like if we take prasada, we can go into ecstasy of understanding that this is Krishna's Anandamaya. Anandamoya is all pervading, because Krishna's energy is full of Ananda, Anandamoya. Anandamoya vyasha. So therefore, in the material world, there's also Ananda. We're not saying there's not Ananda, but the function is different. The function is different. The function is to delude us. So we have to balance that attraction and repulsion aspect. Not that we become, if you say, give up, how can you give up? You can't give up anything. You're not the controller. So there's no question of giving up. If you were the controller, you could give up. You understand? Your power of abnegation, your power of renunciation is artificial, because you can only give up when God blesses you to give up. You understand? You can't give up because you have the power to give up. Because at any moment, just like Prabhupada said, even your movement of your hand can go. Even the movement of your arm, even the movement of your eyes. Everything can go if God wants. So we should understand that everything is resting on Krishna. So there's no question of giving up. That is Palgu Vairagya, Palgu Rayaga. Palgu was a river. Palgu was a beach, and it's dry, but very, very small way down there's water. So the example of Palgu, it means that on the surface there's some dryness, but down lots of water. So similarly in renunciation, on the surface it looks renounced, but if you go a little bit, there's so much desire there. So desire cannot be removed from consciousness. Consciousness and desire and pleasure are all intricately linked. So there is a wonderful manifestation in Krishna's energy, and one should cultivate, as it says in each Upanishad, cultivate the material with the spiritual, side by side. Not that we artificially imitate Gorky Shoda's Babaji or some big renunciant. Then it becomes artificial. But, as he said rightly, that if one is artificially renounced, the heart becomes hard. And you can't love Krishna if you become hard-hearted. How can you? You can't even love Krishna. The heart must be supple and soft. So that means emotions. So the devotee naturally has emotions. That's why Prabhupada says, Arjuna on the battle of Kurukshetra had emotions. He was full of emotion. That's why his bow was falling from his hand. And he's a pure devotee. So we should say, well, if he's a pure devotee, why didn't he just turn around and say, oh, they're all just bags of pus and mucus and bile, and stick a few arrows in them, what does it matter? You see? But there's two sides. That the energy is also spiritual, but it has function is different. You see? Function is different. So there's that mystical function within matter to delude, to bewilder, to eliminate. But if we use everything in Krishna's service, in relationship with Krishna, then it has no inferior connection. There's no inferior, because it's purified, reconnected. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a little attempt.
Going back to the love in the material world, I understood that the spiritual love is transformed into lust in the material world, and there's no love in the material world.
That's the point I'm making. You see, the background is Krishna. If you, just like Prabhupada says, what does it mean to love Krishna? To love Krishna means to love all of Krishna's energy. How can you love God and not love His energy? So you have to see Krishna in His energy. Now Prabhupada said that doesn't mean that you say, oh, here is lion. Oh, this is also Krishna, let me embrace. Let me give the lion a kiss. Because Krishna is there in the lion, and the lion is Krishna's energy, and the lion looks very sweet, so let me give him a big kiss in the mouth. Lion will bite your head off. So it's not that philosophy that we just go around embracing lion. But we can understand that this lion is created by the power of Krishna. And this is Krishna's transcendental variegatedness. The soul is there within that body, and because the soul is in the body, therefore the lion is very dear to us, because the devotee doesn't like to kill even a little ant. So therefore he has no animosity to the lion, because he knows that this is the same spirit soul, but in a different body, different dress. So therefore it's a question of, one time we asked Prabhupada about that. We said, Prabhupada, how does the devotee see Krishna everywhere? Is it that in every atom he sees this four-armed Vishnu, and that means every you see millions and billions of them? So So Prabhupada said it's like this. He said, just like the scientists, when they want to see the molecular content, they use a microscope. So the microscopes allows them to see things that you can't see. You see? So it is if you like, extra vision. Extra vision. So similarly, when one becomes a pure devotee, pramanjali charita bhakti vilochanena, then one's eyes are anointed with the salve of love. So when that anointing of salve of love, then automatically one loves everything. A good example was one follower of Lord Chaitanya, Vasudeva, I think Vasudeva. He had a very bad skin disease. Little worms were eating him. They were eating into his skin. Now you can imagine how itchy that would be, these little insects. But when one would fall out, he would put him back again. So much compassion on that little worm. But we can't imitate that. You see, we can't imitate that. Haridas Thakur, when he was being beaten to death, was simply thinking of the spiritual advancement of those people who were beaten him. So he was thinking how to give them Krishna consciousness. So we can't imitate that. But that platform is there. That platform of absolute love is there on the spiritual platform. That's why Prabhupada, everyone could see that he was in love with every living entity. Prabhupada was full of love. We couldn't understand it. Even we could see. Why were some people attracted to Prabhupada? Because he was full of love. He had love, serious love. It wasn't some kind of artificial arrangement in his mind. He had full love for all living entities. So therefore, Prabhupada's whole life was to give something, not to take. Prabhupada said, I've only come to give. So that affection, that love is there. But it's not that Prabhupada was sentimental. It was scientific, based on realization. So this is a different level, but it is there. So when we say material energy is inferior, we don't mean it's inferior because everything is coming from God. How can something come from God that's inferior? The function is inferior. You understand? The function is inferior. So therefore we want to transform it into a superior function. That is what Krishna consciousness means. To transform it into superior function. Superior function means the eternal activity of the soul in his eternal loving relationship with Krishna. So we utilize everything, cars, planes, buildings, everything in the service of Krishna. Whereas in the material world, everyone is trying to utilize everything in their own service. That's the difference in function. And if you're using everything in the service of Krishna in pure Krishna, you'll never become trapped by Maya. So getting back to that feelings, they won't trap you. Because Krishna protects his devotee. But if you're using it in your own sense gratification, there's danger of being trapped.
I was just thinking that in your point about the analysis of a person's body being a study of urine, it is a fact. And real love in that sense, if a person understands that, would be to take this living entity and free them from that condition. Take them out of the cycle of birth and death, and to bring them back to Krishna.
Yeah, but affection is still there. In family, in ties, there's always affection. You can't, it's a natural thing to have some affection. So, intellectually, in the intellectual plane, or philosophical plane, what you're saying is perfectly right. But on the emotional plane, there is also emotion. And that emotion must be there, because emotions are coming from consciousness. But the emotion must be there for Krishna. When that is Krishna conscious, then everything else becomes properly situated. Just like Prabhupada gave an example, when the sun is in the sky, everything else has its proper situation. But when the sun is not there, everything becomes a source of anxiety or disturbance.
Okay. I just ask a question then. Why is it that the Bhagavatam, it's kind of looking at the world, it seems, from the perspective of a male, looking at the world and showing Maya from that point of view, or not the reverse, from the female? for example, like, you know, in the teachings of, he compares the family to like the children to jackals and all that kind of thing, and the wife to like a tigress. So why is it the Bible times looking at it from the perspective of like, you know?
I don't think it's a question of male or female. I think it's a question of what he's pointing out is that when consciousness is separated from Krishna, in other words, when we're living in the material lusty affairs of this life, of the material world, then all of these things are hostile. Everything is hostile to our self-interest. Our self-interest is to go back home, back to God. So Kapila is showing how the dangers of the material world, the negative, if you like, because Sankhya means to count. So it's to measure or count or to analyze the adversities of the material world. Now, when you talk about the jackals and all of these things, these are examples of material energy working upon us in various forms. The same thing can be understood that when a situation or a relationship or whatever is dovetailed in Krishna's service, then of course these examples are not appropriate. They're not appropriate examples in the true sense. Because we see that many of Lord Chaitanya's followers were married. But it wasn't condemned by Lord Chaitanya. He himself was a householder. But it's not the householder situation or the children or wife. It's the question that if Krishna is removed from that, if you remove Krishna, then all of those philosophical points come into being. Just like the same thing. If we don't offer our food, we're eating poison. So you could say in the material world, everyone's eating poison. So then someone could say, well, you Hare Krishnas are eating poison. But we're not, we're eating prasad because it has connection with Krishna. The connection with Krishna is the most important thing. And when there's that connection, then Krishna says that I give protection. Their devotees are under my protection. So one is protected by Krishna. Just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur had so many children. But he never forgot Krishna ever. So the point is that to show an example to us about how it is not the external that's the problem, it's the internal. If you're internally not Krishna conscious, then all of these external things are great dangers, great adversities, great hostility is there. But if you're Krishna conscious, then you can have, just like we see many examples, Kadarma Muni. Look at Kadarma Muni, he went flying off in a big spaceship and was enjoying it. He expanded himself 9 times to have more sexual activity than ever. But he never forgot Krishna. So it's not a question of the external, it's a question of the internal. What is the internal? The internal situation. So you can't analyze without understanding the full picture. If you say carte blanche that all women are evil, then we might go around having witch hunts and killing them and chopping them up. That's not our philosophy. That's negative, because that's negation. Again, the negative is based upon wrong idea. You cannot renounce sex life. It's not possible. Nobody can renounce sex life. You can only love Krishna, then sex life becomes insignificant. But if you try to renounce sex life, then it's very, very, very difficult to do. And even if you renounce, Krishna is the source of power of renunciation, so therefore you're still getting that power of renunciation from Krishna. Just like Hiranyakashipu, when you wanted power, you have to get it from Brahma. You always have to get it from somewhere. It's not something you have. It's something that you have to get from somewhere. So if you become devotee of Krishna, Krishna says, I protect my devotees. He says, surrender unto me, I will give you all protection. So even if you have 100 million wives, you will have no problem. The progenitors of the universe, they had so many wives, they had no problem. One time we were asking Prabhupada about demigods. Prabhupada said, demigods are devotees. And the difference between the heavenly planets and the material is there you can have sense gratification, but you don't forget Krishna. Here you have sense gratification, you immediately forget Krishna. So it's a question of power. You see? It's not the problem of sense gratification, it's the problem of remembering Krishna. So therefore, that's why these stories in the Bhagavatam, sometimes they're very bewildering, because there's obviously sense gratification going on. But there's not forgetfulness of Krishna, otherwise why would they be recorded as remembrances of Krishna? Because they're transcendental. So that, like a Chintya Beta, Abheda Tattva aspect, is that simultaneously the energy is not different from the energetic, but in all cases the energy is controlled by the energetic. So if we surrender to the energetic, then the energy cannot do anything to us that the energetic doesn't want. So we will not be worried about these situations. But if we are not surrendered to Krishna, then everything is hostile. Even if you don't have a wife or children or anything else, you can be completely bogus. But you may because you have no love for Krishna. So you may be the biggest renouncer in the world, but you have your spiritual life is zero. Because you don't have Krishna. So it's not a question of simply, in other words, it's not a question, see, bhakti is not dependent on vairagya or karma. She's not dependent on jnana or vairagya or karma. Jnana and vairagya, sorry. They are her assistants. You see, bhakti is a power in itself. It doesn't rely on anything. That's why some of these stories are amazing. Because you can see that they're just the pure spiritual thing going on. But because bhakti is not dependent on anything, she's independent. But that doesn't mean we do all nonsense and say, oh, that was bhakti. But it's true, obviously, philosophically, all of these things are absolutely true. So it's a question of understanding. If you take one side without the other. In other words, if you take the philosophy that women are all evil and children are all jackals and they're all tigresses and this and the other. But you don't take the other side, which is to become devotee, then there's nothing. It's not the idea. It's the dangers of that situation, the danger of household life. But for a devotee, that danger, if he's properly situated, should not be there.
Sorry to press the point. I just wonder why it's written from that perspective. So.
Because it's like...
Because you could say, for example, it could say, be careful of your husband because he's like, he'll beat you or something like that. So why does it say, it's always like addressing to the female archangels?
It's not only, at the end of it, there's a whole section where it goes about the male section, and then it says exactly, and of course, it's exactly the male is the same for the female. It says it like itself. And Prabhupada says it in several purports of that too as well.
I'm aware of that, but I'm just wondering why is there some kind of...
Well, the thing is, you see, the whole material energy is based on sex life. The whole interaction of matter in the material world is the interaction between male and female. So obviously, the Bhagavatam is dealing with this analytical study of interaction between male and female. So the dangers of that are analyzed. What are the dangers? So examples are used so as to make one aware of the dangers of falling into the pit, into the dark well of the material world. And, there's just as much danger for a woman with a man as there is for a man with a woman, because it's all interaction of male and female energy.
Isn't it also considered that a male body is more suitable for self-realization, and that a woman should follow a man who's self-realized, and that way she can also...
Yeah, but that wasn't his point. His point is about why it seems to be always slanting on female. In other words, if there's a certain degree of condemnation, his point is that the women seem to be getting the worst end of the stick. But as far as the woman following the man, yes, that's Vedically, you see, Vedic civilization, the men were Krishna conscious, the women were Krishna conscious, and the idealism of it is that they would both go back home, back to Godhead. But obviously, a woman's body is more emotional towards, more attached towards material things. It's just the way they're constituted. Now that's not for a devotee, because a woman devotee may be much more advanced than a man devotee. Because ultimately, see, in bhakti, why is bhakti the only system that allows marriage? None of the other yoga systems allow it. If you go back and study yoga, you'll find all the other systems don't allow marriage. Only bhakti. Because bhakti is beyond all other considerations, you understand? It's not a system. It's the end-all and be-all of knowledge. So therefore, if one is situated in bhakti, then these things are not actually as relevant. They're generally relevant if one doesn't have bhakti. So if a woman has love for Krishna, then she's much greater devotee than a man who might be a big renunciate, big educated, big learned. That's why Lord Chaitanya worshipped gopis. They're women. Why did he not worship Vasudeva, the compiler of Bhagavatam, or Sukadeva Goswami? He worshipped gopis. Because gopis' hearts are full of love for Krishna. So actually, we're all female. In reality, in spiritual sense, every one of us is a female because we're feminine energy, not masculine. Masculine is an artificial creation of material association. We are all feminine. So therefore, we have to become females to love Krishna if you want to enter into, the deeper philosophical aspect. So what is the nature of a female? She has softer, delicate. Female means delicate. So we have to delicately love Krishna. So the gopis were worshipped by Lord Chaitanya. He was a big male renunciate. Lord Chaitanya, there's no one more renounced than Lord Chaitanya and his followers. They were all great renunciates. But they were all worshipping gopis. And what were the gopis doing? The gopis were offering their bodies in the service of Krishna. So one could say, well, that's a bit weird, isn't it? Big male renunciates worshipping females who are offering their bodies to a male. So therefore you could say, well, this is funny philosophy. But the point is you have to understand is that we are neither male nor female. We are actually eternal servants of Krishna. So in the spiritual world, we are Prakriti and Krishna is Purusha. And Radharani is the Supreme Personality of servitude, and we are all her servants. So we naturally love Radharani so as to be engaged in her service, to give our bodies to Krishna. So ultimately, it's all a little complicated, isn't it? Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam Mahaprana.